I stood over the open casket, staring at the heavy layer of makeup on my mother's neck. The mortician had tried his best to hide the entry wound, but I saw it. I saw everything. The police report claimed it was a random robbery, a panicked junkie who shot her for the $40 in her purse. But when I reached down and touched her cold, stiff hand, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. Her knuckles weren't bruised from a fight. They were clean. She hadn't fought back. She knew the person who pulled the trigger. Like the video, subscribe for more betrayal twists, and comment where you're watching from, your city or your country. The flight back from overseas was the longest 14 hours of my life. Usually, when I'm on a transport plane heading home, there is a sense of relief. The mission is done. The target is neutralized. I can finally turn off the part of my brain that scans every rooftop and doorway for a sniper. But this time, the flight felt like a cage. I didn't have a uniform on. I was wearing civilian clothes, jeans, and a black hoodie that felt too light after months of wearing body armor. I sat in the window seat, watching the clouds turn gray as we descended, my phone gripping tight in my hand. I kept reading the text message from my brother, Evan. Mom's gone. You need to come home. Now. That was it. No details. No explanation. Just the end of the world in 7 words. When I landed, nobody was there to pick me up. That was the first sign that things were falling apart. Our family wasn't perfect, but we showed up for each other. I grabbed a taxi outside the terminal. The air here was different than the dry, dusty heat I was used to. It was humid and smelled of exhaust and rain. It smelled like home, but it felt like a graveyard. Where to? The driver asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. He probably saw the look in my eyes, the 1,000-yard stare that doesn't go away just because you're on U.S. soil. I gave him the address. Not my mother's house. The funeral home. We drove in silence. I watched the city pass by. It was the same city I grew up in, but the shadows seemed longer. The neighborhoods looked rougher. There was graffiti on fences that used to be white picket. I had been away for 3 years on back-to-back deployments. I had been so busy fighting wars for other people that I didn't notice the war starting on my own front porch. When I walked into the funeral home, the silence was heavy. It wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. The room smelled of lilies and floor wax, a smell I will hate until the day I die. I saw them standing by the far wall. Evan, my younger brother, looked like he had aged 10 years. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loose. He was pacing, rubbing the back of his neck. Next to him stood his wife, Morgan. Morgan was different. She was perfectly put together. Her black dress was sharp, her hair was immaculate, and her makeup was flawless. She didn't look like a woman mourning her mother-in-law. She looked like a woman waiting for a business meeting to start. "Hunter," Evan said, his voice cracking when he saw me. He rushed over and hugged me. He felt thin, fragile. I hugged him back, but my eyes were already scanning the room, looking for threats, looking for answers. "I'm sorry, man." Evan sobbed into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry." "What happened?" I asked, my voice low and steady. I pulled back and looked at him. The text said nothing. Morgan stepped forward before Evan could answer. She placed a hand on Evan's shoulder, her nails painted a deep, blood red. "It was a robbery, Hunter," she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Just a terrible, random tragedy. The police said she was in the driveway bringing in groceries. Some gangbanger wanted her purse. She must have hesitated, and they shot her. I looked at Morgan. I had known her for 5 years. I never liked her. There was always something behind her eyes, a calculation. Like she was constantly weighing the value of the people around her. A gangbanger. I repeated, "In this neighborhood?" "The neighborhood has changed, Hunter," Morgan said, shaking her head sadly. "It's not safe anymore. We told her to move. We told her to sell the house and move into a facility, but she was so stubborn." I walked past them, toward the casket. My mother, Clara, lay there. She looked small. The woman who had raised 2 boys alone, who had worked double shifts at the diner to pay for my first combat boots. looked like a doll. I stood there for a long time. I tuned out Evan's sobbing and Morgan's whispering. I focused on the details. I've been trained to read bodies. I know what violence looks like. The police report, which was sitting on a small table near the entrance, said it was a single shot to the chest. Close range. I leaned in closer to the casket. I looked at her face. It was relaxed. If someone jumps you in a driveway, you scream. You panic. Your face holds that terror even after death. But Clara looked peaceful. She looked surprised, maybe, but not terrified. And then I saw her hands. I reached out and touched her left hand. It was ice cold. I gently ran my thumb over her ring finger. Where is her wedding ring? I asked, not turning around. They took it, Evan said, blowing his nose. The cops said the robber took everything. Her purse, her phone, her ring. I looked closely at the finger. There was no bruising, no scratch marks. If a junkie is robbing you and ripping a ring off your finger, they hurt you. They twist it. They pull. It leaves a mark. But my mother's finger was smooth. It slid off, I whispered to myself. What? Morgan asked, stepping closer. What did you say? I turned to face them. I said, whoever took the ring didn't fight her for it. It came off easy, or she gave it to them. Morgan's eyes flickered, just for a second. A tiny micro-expression of annoyance. Does it matter, Hunter? She's gone. Focusing on the jewelry isn't going to bring her back. It matters, I said, because the story doesn't fit. The police closed the case, Morgan said quickly. They said these things happen. It's an open and shut investigation. They have leads, but look, we need to focus on the funeral. The service is tomorrow. Then we can handle the estate. The estate? I asked. The house, Morgan said. We can't leave it empty. It's a target now. Evan and I were thinking we should list it immediately. Get it sold before the market dips. My mother's body wasn't even in the ground yet, and she was talking about the market. I looked at Evan. Is that what you want? To sell Mom's house? Evan looked at the floor. I don't know, Hunter. We have some debts. Morgan thinks it's for the best. We can't afford the upkeep. I felt a heat rising in my chest. It was a familiar heat. It was the feeling I got before a firefight. But I pushed it down. I needed to be cold. We aren't selling anything, I said. Not until I find the person who did this. Morgan sighed. A loud, dramatic exhale. Hunter, don't play the hero. You're not in the special forces here. You're just a grieving son. Let the police do their job. I am going to the house, I said. You can't, Morgan said. It's a crime scene. You just said the case was closed. I countered. She froze. She had tripped over her own lie. If it was an active crime scene, we couldn't sell it. If the case was closed, I could go there. I just meant it's messy, she stammered. You don't want to see it. Give me the keys, I said to Evan. Evan fumbled in his pocket and handed me the spare key to Mom's place. He looked like he wanted to say something, wanted to warn me, but he glanced at Morgan and stayed silent. I walked out of the funeral home without looking back. I took the taxi to the house. It was late afternoon now. The street was quiet. The house looked exactly as I remembered it. A small, blue bungalow with a porch that needed painting. There was no yellow tape. No police cruiser out front. I walked up the driveway. I looked at the ground. There were faint chalk marks where the body had been, but the rain was already washing them away. I stood on the spot where she died. I closed my eyes and tried to visualize it. Driveway. Groceries. Gunshot. I looked at the front door. It was locked. I looked up at the corner of the porch roof. My mother had installed a security camera 2 years ago. I had sent her the money for it. It was a high-end model, motion-activated, night vision. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and old paper. Her coat was still hanging on the rack. It felt like she was just in the other room making tea. I walked straight to the living room where the router and the security hub were kept. I pulled up the laptop she kept on the side table. I knew her password. It was my birthday. I logged into the security system. I wanted to see the footage. I wanted to see the face of the man I was going to hunt down. I clicked on the date of the murder. File not found. I frowned. I checked the system logs. The camera hadn't malfunctioned. It hadn't run out of battery. The log showed a manual command entered at 4 p.m., 2 hours before she was shot. System disabled. User admin. Someone had turned the cameras off from inside the house. My mother wasn't good with technology. She barely knew how to check her email. She didn't know how to disable the system. I sat back in the chair, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the dark room. The killer didn't just stumble upon her. The killer was invited in. Or, the killer had a key. I looked around the empty living room. Shadows stretched across the floor. I wasn't alone in this. Someone close to her had opened the door for death. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my combat knife. I set it on the table next to the laptop. Okay, I whispered to the empty room. Let's play. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark living room of my mother's house, the glow of the laptop screen washing over my face. I stared at the security system logs for hours, reading and rereading the same line. System disabled. User admin. For PM. My mother was at the grocery store at that time. I had already confirmed it by calling the store and asking the manager if he remembered her. He did. He said she had been there buying ingredients for soup, chatting with the cashier about the weather. She left around 5:30 p.m. So who was in the house at 4 p.m.? By the time the sun started creeping through the dusty blinds, I had made my decision. I needed to take this to the police. I printed out the logs, circled the timestamp in red marker, and drove straight to the precinct. The station was a mess of ringing phones, shuffling officers, and the smell of burnt coffee. I walked up to the front desk and asked for Detective Colin. The officer at the desk told me to wait. I stood there for 20 minutes before Colin finally appeared, looking annoyed that I had shown up at all. He was a heavy man in his late 50s, with a wrinkled shirt and a coffee stain on his tie. His eyes were tired, like he had stopped caring about his job years ago. "Mr. Hunter," he said, mispronouncing my name again. "What can I do for you?" I slid the printed logs across the desk. My mother's security system was disabled manually 2 hours before she was killed. From inside the house. That means someone who knew the code turned it off. This wasn't a random robbery. Colin picked up the paper, glanced at it for maybe 3 seconds, and tossed it back onto the desk. "Glitch." "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "These cheap home security systems glitch all the time," he said, leaning back in his chair. "The router probably reset. Your mom might have unplugged it by accident. It doesn't mean anything." "My mother was at the store at 4 p.m., I said, my voice harder now. The house was empty. Someone was inside. Colin sighed, rubbing his eyes. "Look, I get it. You're military. You want a clear enemy. You want a mission. But this is real life. Junkies break into houses. They panic. They shoot. It's tragic, but it happens every day. We're doing everything we can." "Are you?" I asked. "Because it looks like you closed the case in 24 hours. His jaw tightened. "We closed it because there's no evidence pointing to anything else. No witnesses. No fingerprints. The suspect is long gone. If we get a lead, we'll follow it. But I'm not going to waste department resources chasing ghosts because you don't want to accept what happened." I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, loud enough to turn a few heads in the bullpen. I wanted to grab him by his stained tie and drag him to my mother's house. I wanted to make him care. But that would land me in handcuffs, and I couldn't help my mother from inside a cell. "You're not going to do anything," I said. It wasn't a question. "Pending further evidence," Colin said, already looking back at his computer screen. "Go home. Bury your mom. Move on." I walked out of the station, the morning sun hitting me like a slap. The rage in my chest was ice cold. They weren't going to help. The system was broken, lazy, or maybe just overwhelmed. It didn't matter. If I wanted answers, I had to go where the police refused to go. I spent the afternoon driving through the neighborhood. I hadn't been home in 3 years, and the change was brutal. The streets I used to ride my bike on were now lined with boarded-up windows and graffiti. I saw lookouts on corners, teenagers with dead eyes, watching every car that passed. I needed information. I needed a name. As the sun set, I changed out of my civilian clothes into something darker, a gray jacket, dark jeans, boots. I didn't carry a gun. I didn't need one. I headed to a place I remembered from my teenage years, a dive bar called the Iron Rail. It was the kind of place where the floor stuck to your shoes and the air was thick with cigarette smoke, even though smoking inside had been illegal for years. The music was loud, a thumping bass that rattled the bottles on the shelves. I ordered a soda water and stood at the far end of the bar, my back to the wall. I wasn't there to drink. I was there to listen. I watched the reflection in the mirror behind the bar. Two guys in a booth behind me were talking loud, flashing cash, laughing. They looked like low-level dealers, nervous energy, constantly checking their phones. "I'm telling you, the new territory is wide open," one of them said. "Since the takeover, the cops don't even roll through 5th Street anymore." 5th Street. My mother's street. "Yeah, well, I ain't messing with that," the other guy replied. "You saw what happened to the last crew that tried to hold out. Ryder doesn't ask twice." Ryder. The name hit me like a punch. I didn't recognize it from the old days. This was someone new. "Ryder is crazy, man." The first guy laughed nervously. "He's got the whole block on lockdown. Even the old folks pay the tax now, or they get evicted." "Evicted?" The second guy scoffed. "You mean torched." I gripped my glass. The tax. Extortion. Was that what this was? Did my mother refuse to pay protection money? I needed more. I needed one of them to say her name. I needed confirmation. I waited. After about 15 minutes, the guy in the red jacket got up and headed toward the bathroom. I followed him. The bathroom was filthy, covered in graffiti, reeking of bleach and urine. He was washing his hands when I walked in. I locked the door behind me and flipped the sign to occupied. He looked up in the mirror, saw me, and turned around fast. "Hey, man, wait your turn." "I don't want the sink," I said. My voice was calm. "I want to know about Ryder." His eyes widened. He tried to puff up his chest. "I don't know no Ryder. Get out of my face." He reached into his jacket. I stepped in, grabbed his wrist, and twisted it behind his back in one fluid motion. I slammed him chest first into the tiled wall. He yelped, the fight draining out of him instantly. "Don't reach," I whispered. "I'm not a cop. I'm worse." Okay. My arm," he gasped. "Who is Ryder?" I asked. "He's the boss. He runs the East Side now. Drugs, protection, real estate. He's buying up everything." "Real estate." I repeated. The word echoed what Morgan had said. "We need to sell the house." "Yeah." He forces people out, buys the places cheap through shell companies, flips them. That's his game. I let him go. He slumped against the sink, rubbing his shoulder. "If you tell anyone I was here," I said, "I'll find you." I unlocked the door and walked out. I stepped into the cool night air. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from clarity. This wasn't a robbery. It wasn't random. It was a business transaction. My mother was sitting on a property someone wanted. She wouldn't sell, so they removed her. But there was a problem with that theory. Ryder buys properties cheap. My brother and Morgan were desperate to sell immediately. I stopped under a flickering street lamp. A dark thought began to form. Morgan had mentioned debts. She had been quick to dismiss the murder as random. I pulled out my phone. I had a buddy back at the base, a guy named Felix who owed me a favor. I typed out a text. "Need a full financial background check on Evan and Morgan. Also, everything you can find on a local target named Ryder." I hit send. I wasn't just hunting a gang leader anymore. I was hunting for the connection between the street and my family. I didn't leave my mother's house that night. I couldn't. Leaving felt like abandoning her all over again. I slept on the old floral couch in the living room, my combat knife on the coffee table next to me. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside made my eyes snap open. I was in full operational mode, alert, tense, waiting for a threat. The next morning, the threat didn't come through the window. It came through the front door. I was in the kitchen, making black coffee in the same pot my mother had used for 20 years, when I heard a key turn in the lock. The door swung open, and voices filled the hallway. "We have to get the staging furniture in here by Tuesday," a female voice said sharply. "If we list it as a fixer-upper with potential, we can move it in under a week." It was Morgan. I stepped out of the kitchen, mug in hand. Morgan and Evan froze in the entryway. They were dressed in business casual clothes, looking less like grieving relatives and more like real estate agents on a tight schedule. Morgan was holding a clipboard. Evan was carrying a box of packing tape. "Hunter." Evan looked surprised, then guilty. "We didn't know you were staying here." "Where else would I stay?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. "It's Mom's house." "Well, yes, but—" Evan stammered. He looked tired. The dark circles under his eyes were darker than yesterday. He kept glancing at Morgan, like a dog waiting for a command. Morgan recovered quickly. She stepped forward, her heels clicking loudly on the hardwood floor. "We thought you'd get a hotel. It can't be good for you, being here alone, surrounded by memories." "I like the memories," I said flatly. "What are you doing with the tape?" "We're starting the packing process," Morgan said, her voice brisk and efficient. "Like we discussed, we need to clear the personal items so we can get the appraisers in. The market is volatile, Hunter. If we wait, we lose money." I took a sip of my coffee. It was bitter. "I told you yesterday. We aren't selling." The air in the room changed instantly. The fake sympathy on Morgan's face vanished, replaced by a flash of genuine anger. "Hunter, be reasonable," she snapped. "This house is a money pit. The neighborhood is dangerous. You saw what happened. Do you want to keep it as a shrine? It's selfish." "Selfish," I repeated. "Mom isn't even buried yet. The funeral is in 3 hours. And you're here with packing tape. We have debts." Morgan's voice rose, cracking slightly. It wasn't just anger, it was panic. "Real debts, Hunter. We can't afford to float the taxes on this place. We need the equity. Now." I looked at Evan. "What kind of debts, Evan?" Evan looked at his shoes. "Just credit cards. A bad investment. It's manageable, but the house would solve everything. It would give us a clean slate." "A clean slate," I said. "Paid for with Mom's blood." "That is unfair," Morgan screamed. She threw the clipboard onto the entry table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "We are trying to survive. You come back here after 3 years of playing soldier, and you think you can dictate our lives? You don't know what it's been like. You don't know the pressure we've been under." She was breathing hard, her face flushed. This wasn't normal grief. This was desperation. I walked over to the table and picked up the clipboard. I looked at the top sheet. It wasn't a list of personal items to pack. It was a pre-written sales contract, dated 2 days ago. "This is dated the day she died," I said, looking up at Morgan. The room went dead silent. I prepared it in advance," Morgan stammered, her confidence faltering for the first time. "We had discussed it with her. Before the robbery. She was going to sign it. Mom told me last week on the phone she was planting a new garden," I said softly. "She wasn't planning on moving anywhere." I ripped the contract in half. Then I ripped it again. I let the pieces flutter to the floor between us. "Get out," I said. "Hunter," Evan started. "Get out," I shouted, my voice booming off the walls. "Take your tape and your clipboard and get out of this house. If I see either of you here before the investigation is over, I will change the locks. And if you try to sell this place behind my back, I will burn the sale to the ground legally." Morgan glared at me with pure hatred. It was a look I had seen on enemies in the field. The look of someone who realizes you are an obstacle that needs to be removed. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "You don't know who you're messing with." "I'm messing with my family," I said. "Unless you're telling me you're not family anymore." She grabbed Evan's arm and practically dragged him out the door. Evan looked back at me one last time, his eyes pleading, but he didn't say a word. He just let her pull him away. I watched them get into their car and peel away from the curb. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. "You don't know who you're messing with." That was a strange thing to say to your brother-in-law. I went back to the kitchen and poured the rest of the coffee down the sink. I didn't want it anymore. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Felix, my contact from the base. Subject, Ryder, aka Marcus Ryder. Status, high-level target. Suspected of running a massive money laundering operation through real estate acquisitions in the East Side District. FBI has been trying to nail him for 2 years, but can't find the paper trail. Subject, Evan and Morgan. Status, flagged. Notes, joint bank accounts are overdrawn. 3 maxed out credit cards. But here's the kicker. Morgan has a secondary account under her maiden name. It received 3 deposits of $5,000 in the last 2 months. Cash deposits. Untraceable. I stared at the screen. $5,000. 3 times. That was 15 grand in cash. Where does a struggling housewife get 15 grand in cash while her husband is drowning in debt? The guy at the bar had said Ryder buys properties cheap. He forces people out. And now I knew how. He didn't just use thugs. He used insiders. Morgan wasn't just anxious to sell the house. She was on a deadline. I grabbed my jacket. The funeral was in 2 hours, but I had a stop to make first. I needed to see exactly how deep this route went. I walked into the living room and looked at the spot on the wall where the family photos hung. There was a picture of the 3 of us from Christmas 5 years ago. Mom was smiling, holding a pie. Evan had his arm around Morgan. I was standing in the back, looking uncomfortable in a sweater. I took the picture off the wall and smashed it against the edge of the table. The glass shattered. I pulled out the photo, folded it so only my mother was visible, and put it in my pocket. The rest of them could go to hell. The funeral passed in a blur of gray skies and hollow condolences. I stood by the grave, watching the dirt hit the casket, feeling nothing but a cold, focused drive. Evan cried the whole time. Morgan stood next to him, wearing dark sunglasses, checking her watch every 10 minutes. I didn't speak to them. I didn't even look at them. I had a mission now. As soon as the last prayer was said, I walked away. I didn't go to the wake. I went hunting. I knew I couldn't get to Ryder directly. Guys like him sit in ivory towers, surrounded by layers of muscle and lawyers. To get to the king, you have to crush the pawns. I went back to the neighborhood around the iron rail. I found the guy from the bathroom, the one in the red jacket. His name, I learned from listening to the street chatter, was Tico. He was a runner, a nobody. But nobodies hear everything. I tracked him to an alleyway behind a pawn shop on 4th Street. He was counting cash, leaning against a dumpster, thinking he was safe. I didn't run at him. I didn't shout. I simply stepped out of the shadows and blocked the only exit. Tico looked up, saw my silhouette, and froze. He recognized me. The color drained from his face. "You," he whispered. "I told you everything I know, man. I swear. You told me who runs the streets," I said, walking slowly toward him. My boots made no sound on the wet pavement. "Now you're going to tell me how he does it." Tico pulled a small knife from his belt. His hand was shaking. "Stay back. I'm protected. Ryder will skin you if you touch me." I didn't stop. When he lunged, it was almost pathetic. I sidestepped, caught his wrist, and applied pressure to the radial nerve. The knife clattered to the ground. I spun him around and slammed him face first into the brick wall, pinning him there with my forearm against his neck. "Ryder isn't here," I whispered into his ear. "I am. What do you want?" Tico wheezed, struggling for air. "My mother," I said. "Clara Vance. She lived on 5th Street. Blue house. She was shot 2 days ago." Tico went rigid. He stopped struggling. That reaction told me everything. He knew the name. I heard about that," he stammered. "Robbery gone wrong. Junkie looking for a fix. Don't lie to me." I tightened my grip. Junkies don't turn off security cameras before they break in. Junkies don't leave the laptop and take the wedding ring. "Who did it?" "I don't know." Tico cried out. "I'm just a runner." "Then run your mouth," I said. "Was she on the list? Was she a target?" Tico hesitated. I pulled my knife, my combat blade, and let the cold steel touch the skin of his cheek. I didn't cut him. I just let him feel the temperature of the metal. "Talk," I commanded. "She was a problem." Tico blurted out, tears streaming down his face. She was a problem, okay? That's all I heard. How was she a problem? She was asking questions. She was going to the city council meetings. She was trying to organize the neighbors to stop the buyouts. Ryder hates noise. He likes quiet. She was making noise. My mother, the retired nurse, standing up to a crime syndicate because she didn't want her neighbors to lose their homes. It sounded exactly like her. So Ryder ordered the hit. I asked. No, not Ryder directly. Tico gasped. Ryder doesn't do wet work for small stuff like that. He hires it out. But it wasn't just about the noise. It was about the leverage. What leverage? Someone inside gave the green light, Tico whispered. That's the rumor on the street. It wasn't a break-in. The door was unlocked. The shooter walked right in. They said it was paid for. I stepped back, letting Tico slide down the wall to the ground. He curled into a ball, terrifyingly sobbing. Paid for, I repeated. Yeah, Tico sniffled. It wasn't a robbery. It was a cleanup job. $40 was just to make it look like street crime. I looked down at him. Who paid for it? I don't know the name. Tico swore. I swear on my life. But the shooter is a guy named Kuss. He hangs out at the shipyard. That's all I know. Kuss. I memorized the name. Get out of here, I said. If I see you in this neighborhood again, you won't walk away. Tico scrambled up, grabbed his knife, and ran like the devil was chasing him. I stood alone in the alley. The pieces were locking together, forming a picture I didn't want to see. My mother wasn't just killed. She was assassinated. She was an obstacle to a business deal. Ryder wanted the land. My mother was organizing the resistance. But Tico said someone inside gave the green light. Someone paid for it. Ryder had the muscle, but he needed access. I thought about the cash deposits in Morgan's secret bank account. $15,000. Was that the price of a mother's life? $5,000 down. $10,000 on completion? I felt sick. Physically sick. I leaned against the damp brick wall and took a deep breath, trying to steady my hands. I had been training for war my whole adult life. But in war, you know who the enemy is. They wear a different uniform. They fly a different flag. Here, the enemy was wearing a black dress and standing next to my brother at the grave. I pushed off the wall. I had a name now. Kuss. The shooter. If I could find Kuss, I could make him talk. And if he talked, I could nail Morgan to the wall. I checked my watch. It was 8 p.m. The shipyard would be active. I wasn't going to wait for a warrant. I wasn't going to wait for Detective Colin. I was going to the shipyard. And I was going to introduce Kuss to the consequences of his actions. The shipyard was a graveyard of rusted metal and dark water. I moved through the shadows of the shipping containers, scanning for movement. Tico had given me a location, Warehouse 4B. That was where Kuss operated. I approached the sliding metal door. It was cracked open. A bad sign. I drew my knife and slipped inside. The smell hit me instantly. Iron and blood. Kuss was there. But he wasn't going to talk. He was slumped in a plastic chair in the center of the room, a single bullet hole in his temple. The gun lay on the floor near his hand, staged to look like a suicide. But the angle was wrong. I cursed silently. Loose ends. Ryder was cleaning house. He knew I was asking questions. Tico must have called someone the second he ran out of that alley. I checked Kuss's pockets. Empty. No phone. No wallet. Just a lighter and a pack of cigarettes. I was too late. The shooter was dead, which meant the direct link to the murder weapon was gone. I stepped out of the warehouse, frustration boiling in my gut. I had no witness. I had no confession, but I still had the money trail. I sat in my rental car, hidden behind a stack of pallets, and pulled up the file Felix had sent me on my phone. I needed to look closer at those bank records. I zoomed in on Morgan's secret account. The deposits were cash, untraceable. But there was something else. A recurring withdrawal. Every month, for the last year, a small amount was transferred to a shell company called Obsidian Holdings. I ran the name through the public database on my phone. Obsidian Holdings. Registered agent. A lawyer named Victor Thorne. I knew that name. Victor Thorne was a high-end defense attorney who represented half the organized crime figures in the city. But why was my sister-in-law paying a mob lawyer monthly retainers? And then I saw it. A cross-reference Felix had flagged in red at the bottom of the document. Obsidian Holdings lists a secondary address, 452 Oak Street. My blood ran cold. 452 Oak Street was my mother's old rental property, a small duplex she owned across town. She had sold it 5 years ago, or so I thought. I logged into the county property records. The owner listed wasn't a new buyer. It was Clara Vance. My mother still owned it. But the management company listed was Obsidian Holdings. The pieces slammed together in my mind, forming a picture so grotesque I almost threw up. Morgan hadn't just borrowed money. She was using my mother's name. She had set up a shell company using Clara's clean credit and assets to wash money for Ryder. The rent payments going into that account were dirty cash being cleaned. My mother, the woman who never even got a parking ticket, was unknowingly the face of a money laundering operation. And if Clara had found out, if she had received a tax bill or a letter from the bank, she would have threatened to go to the police. She would have tried to stop it. That was the noise Tico was talking about, not community organizing. Asterisk blackmail. Asterisk I needed visual proof. I drove to the address listed for Obsidian Holdings, a nondescript office building downtown. It was late, past midnight. The streets were empty. I wasn't going to break in. I was going to wait. I parked down the block and watched. For 3 hours, nothing moved. Then, at 2 a.m., a black SUV rolled up to the back entrance. A man got out. I recognized him from the intelligence file Felix sent. It was Ryder's right-hand man, a brute named Brick. He stood by the door, smoking, checking his phone. 10 minutes later, another car pulled up. A silver sedan. I zoomed in with my phone's camera. The driver's door opened. A woman stepped out. She was wearing a trench coat and a scarf wrapped around her head, trying to be discreet. But I knew the walk. I knew the shoes. It was Morgan. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was one thing to suspect it. It was another to see it. My brother's wife, meeting a gang enforcer in a back alley at 2 a.m. She handed Brick a thick brown envelope. He opened it, thumbed through the cash, and nodded. Then he handed her something back. A set of keys. They spoke for less than a minute. Morgan looked terrified, constantly looking over her shoulder. Brick looked bored. She got back in her car and drove off. I didn't follow her. I stayed focused on Brick. She had just paid him. But for what? The hit on Clara was already done. Kiss was dead. Unless the payment wasn't for a job done. It was for silence. Or protection. I watched Brick drive away. I sat in the dark car, the engine cold. Morgan wasn't just in debt. She was an employee. She was the bridge between Ryder's dirty money and legitimate banking. She had used my mother's good name to build a criminal empire. And when Clara found out, Morgan didn't just panic. She executed her. My mother died because she refused to be corrupt. I looked at the photo of my mother on my phone screen. Her kind eyes, her soft smile. I got them, Mom. I whispered, my voice breaking. I see them now. But seeing them wasn't enough. I needed to destroy them. And I couldn't just shoot them. That would be too easy. I needed to expose the whole rot. I needed to take down the lawyer, the money, the gang, and the family traitor all at once. I started the car. I wasn't going back to the empty house. I was going to pay a visit to my brother. I needed to know if he was a victim in this, or a co-conspirator. If Evan knew, if my own brother knew his wife killed our mother and said nothing. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. God help him if he knew. I arrived at Evan's house at 3 a.m. The lights were off. The street was silent. I didn't knock. I used the spare key I had taken from my mother's key ring years ago, the one Evan never knew she kept. I let myself in quietly and moved through the dark hallway. I could hear snoring from the upstairs bedroom. Evan's snoring. The same loud, rattling sound he'd made since childhood. I climbed the stairs, stepping only on the edges to avoid creaking. I reached the bedroom door. It was open. I could see Evan's outline under the blankets. Morgan's side of the bed was empty. She wasn't home. I walked to Evan's side and placed my hand over his mouth. His eyes snapped open, wild with panic. "It's me," I whispered. "Don't scream." I removed my hand. Evan sat up, gasping, his hand clutching his chest. "Hunter? What the hell? Where is she?" I asked. "Morgan." He looked confused, disoriented. "I don't know. She said she had to run to the store. She does that sometimes when she can't sleep." "Why? What's going on?" I grabbed him by the collar of his pajama shirt and pulled him close. "Tell me the truth, Evan. Did you know?" "Know what?" His voice cracked with fear. "About the money. About Ryder. About Mom." Evan's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" I let him go. I searched his eyes for deception. I had interrogated enough prisoners to know when someone was lying. Evan wasn't lying. He was terrified and confused. "Morgan has been laundering money for a gang leader named Ryder," I said, my voice low and controlled. "She used Mom's name, Mom's credit, Mom's properties. And when Mom found out, Morgan had her killed." Evan's mouth opened. No sound came out. He looked like I had just shot him. That's insane," he finally whispered. "Morgan wouldn't. She couldn't." "I saw her tonight," I said. "Meeting Ryder's enforcer. Handing him cash. She's been lying to you, Evan. For years." Evan shook his head violently, tears welling in his eyes. "No. No. She told me the debts were from her father's medical bills. She told me we just had bad luck with investments. She wouldn't lie about that. She wouldn't kill Mom." I pulled out my phone and showed him the bank records Felix had sent. "Look, these are deposits into an account under her maiden name. 15,000 in the last 2 months. Where does that money come from, Evan? You're drowning in debt, but she's getting cash deposits?" Evan stared at the screen. His hands were shaking. I didn't know about that account." "What else don't you know?" I asked. He buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. "She's been distant. Cold. I thought it was the stress. I thought it was my fault. I've been trying so hard to fix everything, but nothing I do is good enough. She keeps saying we need money. More money. Always more." I sat down on the edge of the bed. "Evan, listen to me. I need you to do exactly what I say. Can you do that?" He looked up, his face wet with tears. "What do you want me to do?" "I need you to act normal," I said. "Pretend you don't know anything. I'm going to set a trap. But if she suspects you know, she'll run. Or worse, she'll eliminate you too." Evan's eyes widened. "You think she'd kill me?" "I think she's capable of anything," I said. "She killed the woman who raised you. Don't underestimate her." Evan nodded slowly, his breath hitching. Okay. What's the plan?" "Tomorrow, you're going to tell her you want to move forward with selling Mom's house. Tell her you talked to me, and I'm finally willing to cooperate. Make her believe she's winning. And then I'm going to record her. I need her to say it out loud. I need her to admit what she did. And I need her to lead me to Ryder." Evan wiped his face with the back of his hand. "How are you going to record her?" I pulled a small device from my jacket pocket. It was a high-grade listening transmitter, military issue. "I'm going to place these throughout the house. Audio only. I'll be listening remotely." "That's illegal," Evan said weakly. "So is murder," I replied. Evan didn't argue. I spent the next hour planting the devices. One in the living room, hidden inside a smoke detector. One in the kitchen, tucked behind the microwave vent. One in the bedroom, inside the alarm clock on Morgan's nightstand. By the time I was done, it was almost 5 a.m. I heard the garage door rumble open. "She's back," I whispered. "Remember, act normal. You're tired. You're sad. You miss Mom. But you're ready to move on." Evan nodded, his face pale. I slipped out the back door and into the pre-dawn darkness. I drove to a parking lot 2 blocks away and synced the listening devices to my phone. I put in earbuds and waited. I heard Morgan walk into the house. I heard her heels click on the tile. I heard her sigh, the sound of someone exhausted. "You're still awake?" she said. Her voice was soft, almost tender. "Couldn't sleep," Evan replied. He sounded convincing. "Good. Did you take your pills?" Morgan asked. "Yeah. I just I keep thinking about Hunter. What about him? Morgan's tone shifted slightly. Sharper. He came by earlier. Evan lied smoothly. He said he's willing to talk about the house. He said he doesn't want to fight anymore. He just wants closure. There was a pause. I held my breath. Really? Morgan sounded suspicious. That doesn't sound like him. He's grieving, Evan said. We all are. He said he'll sign the paperwork if we donate part of the sale to a veterans charity in Mom's name. He just wants it to mean something. Another pause. Longer this time. That's good, Morgan finally said. But her voice was tight. She didn't believe it. Not fully. I think we should move fast, Evan continued. Before he changes his mind. Yeah, we should. Morgan's voice was distant now, like she was thinking. I heard footsteps. The sound of a phone being dialed. Who are you calling? Evan asked. Just checking in with the realtor, Morgan said quickly. Go back to bed, baby. I'll handle this. I heard her walk into another room. A door closed. Her voice dropped to a whisper. It's me. We have a problem. Hunter agreed to sell, but I don't trust it. He's too calm. Yeah, I know. No, I don't think he knows, but he's smart. Military smart. Okay, tomorrow night. The usual place. And bring the final payment. I want out of this. I'm done. She hung up. I replayed the recording. She didn't say Ryder's name. She didn't confess to the murder. But she said final payment. She said usual place. Tomorrow night, I would follow her. And tomorrow night, I would end this. I didn't spend the day resting. If I was going to take down Ryder, I couldn't just walk into a meeting and hope for the best. I needed to isolate him. I needed to strip away his power, his money, and his protection. A king without a castle is just a man. And men bleed. I had the intelligence file from Felix. It contained locations of 3 warehouses Ryder used for distribution, 2 safe houses for his top lieutenants, and a shipping container at the docks used for weapons storage. The FBI had been building a case for 2 years, but they were moving too slow. They were waiting for the big fish. I wasn't waiting. I was going to blow up the pond. I drove to a burner phone shop on the outskirts of the city. Cash only. No cameras. I bought 3 cheap handsets. At 10 a.m., I made the first call. FBI tip line, the automated voice said. This is not a drill, I said, disguising my voice with a low, gravelly tone. Warehouse on 14th and Pines. 40 kilos of heroin in the sub-basement. Access code 7741. Moving in 1 hour. I hung up and smashed the phone. At 11:30 a.m., I made the second call. This time to the state police. Weapons cache. Dock 4, container 882. Automatic rifles, stolen military grade. If you don't get there in 30 minutes, they'll be on the street. I hung up and smashed the second phone. I sat in my car, listening to the police scanner app on my real phone. Within 20 minutes, the radio was screaming. All units, 14th and Pines. Suspects fleeing. Shots fired. Backup requested at the docks. We have a massive seizure. Repeat, massive seizure. Chaos. Pure, unadulterated chaos. Ryder's network was burning. His lieutenants were either getting arrested or going underground. His supply lines were cut. His cash flow was frozen. By 3 p.m., the streets were buzzing. Every dealer, runner, and lookout was panicking. They knew someone had ratted. They didn't know who. Paranoia is a powerful weapon. I drove back to my surveillance spot near Evan's house. I put my earbuds in. The house was quiet for most of the day. Evan had gone to work, trying to maintain the facade. Morgan was home. I could hear her pacing. Back and forth. Back and forth. The click of her heels on the hardwood was fast, erratic. Her phone rang. She picked up on the first ring. What is happening? She hissed into the phone. I'm seeing it on the news. They raided the warehouse. A voice on the other end, deep, angry, distorted by static, barked back. I recognized the tone. It was a man used to giving orders, but right now, he sounded cornered. Someone talked, the voice said. The feds are everywhere. My accounts are frozen. I need cash. Liquid cash. Now. I don't have it. Morgan whispered, her voice trembling. I gave you everything last night. The house sale hasn't gone through yet. Find it, the voice growled. Or I burn you. I have the emails, Morgan. I have the recordings. If I go down, you go down with me. You want to spend the rest of your life in a federal prison? Or do you want to be free? Don't threaten me, Ryder. Morgan snapped, but her voice broke. Tonight, Ryder said. 10 p.m. The old shipyard. Bring me 50 grand. Sell your jewelry. Rob your husband. I don't care. Just get it. The line went dead. Morgan let out a scream of frustration. I heard something shatter. A vase, maybe a glass. 50 grand, she muttered to herself. Oh God, 50 grand. She started moving fast. I heard drawers opening and slamming shut. I heard the safe in the bedroom closet beep. She was liquidating. She was going to drain whatever was left of her life to save her own skin. I smiled grimly in the dark car. Ryder was desperate. Morgan was panicked. They were both going to be at the shipyard tonight. The same place I found Cass's body. It was fitting. They were returning to the scene of the crime to bury themselves. I texted Felix one last time. Location confirmed. Old shipyard. 10 p.m. High-value target Ryder will be present. Bring the cavalry. But give me 10 minutes alone first. Felix replied instantly. 10 minutes. Then we breach. I check my gear. Flashlight. Zip ties. My combat knife. I didn't bring a gun. I wanted Ryder to know I didn't need one to take him apart. I drove to the shipyard early. 8 p.m. I wanted to scope out the terrain. The place was a ghost town at night. Rusted cranes loomed overhead like skeletal fingers. The wind held off the water, cold and biting. I found a vantage point on top of a stack of shipping containers overlooking the main clearing. It was the perfect kill box. One way in, one way out. I settled in and waited. The hours ticked by. The cold seeped into my bones, but I didn't feel it. I felt only the burning need for justice. At 9:55 p.m., headlights cut through the darkness. Ryder's black SUV rolled into the clearing. It looked battered, dirt on the sides, a cracked taillight. He was running ragged. He got out. He was alone. No bodyguards. No entourage. Just a desperate man in a leather jacket, pacing, checking his watch, holding a duffel bag. 5 minutes later, Morgan's silver sedan arrived. She parked opposite him. She stayed in the car for a moment, gathering her courage. Then she stepped out. She was holding a large purse. They met in the middle of the clearing, illuminated by the headlights of their cars. Did you get it? Ryder demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. I got 30, Morgan said, her voice shaking. That's all I could get on short notice. I cleaned out the emergency fund. I sold my diamond earrings. 30 isn't 50, Ryder shouted, grabbing her arm. It's all I have. Morgan screamed back. You promised this would be over. You promised if I handled the money, I'd be safe. Now you're dragging me into this mess. You were in the mess the minute you forged your mother-in-law's signature. Ryder spat. You think you're innocent? You paid for the hit, Morgan. It was your money that put the bullet in her chest. Because she was going to talk. Morgan cried. She found the statements. She was going to the police. I did it for us. For Evan. To save our future. I had heard enough. I stood up on top of the container, silhouetted against the moon. That's a lie, Morgan. I called out, my voice echoing through the empty yard. They both froze and looked up. You didn't do it for Evan, I said, looking down at them like a judge from on high. You did it because you're greedy. And now, you're going to pay the bill. I jumped down. The drop from the container was 15 feet. I landed in a crouch, absorbing the impact, and rose slowly. The sound of my boots hitting the concrete was the only noise in the clearing. Ryder spun around, reaching for his waistband. He was fast, but he was sloppy. Desperation makes people clumsy. Who the hell are you? Ryder snarled, pulling a silver pistol. I'm the eviction notice, I said, walking toward them. I didn't rush. I kept my hands visible, away from my pockets. Morgan gasped, stepping back toward her car. Hunter? Oh God. Hunter, get out of here. He'll kill you. He's going to try. I said calmly. Ryder fired. The shot cracked through the air, but I was already moving. I dove to the left, rolling behind a rusted forklift. The bullet sparked off the metal, whining into the night. You want to play hero? Ryder shouted, advancing. I'll put you in the ground right next to your mother. That was the trigger. I didn't wait for him to flank me. I vaulted over the forklift, using the momentum to close the distance. Ryder raised the gun again, but I was inside his guard. I grabbed the barrel of the pistol, twisting it upward and away, forcing his wrist to snap. He screamed, dropping the weapon. I didn't stop. I drove my knee into his gut, doubling him over, then delivered a sharp, precise strike to the side of his neck. He crumbled to the pavement, gasping for air, his eyes rolling back. It took 3 seconds. I kicked the gun away into the darkness. I turned to Morgan. She was frozen, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. Hunter, she whimpered. Please. I didn't mean for it to happen. He forced me. He threatened me. I looked down at Ryder, who was wheezing on the ground, trying to crawl toward his car. I put my boot on his chest and pressed down. Stay, I ordered. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. It was recording. It had been recording since I jumped down. You're lying, Morgan, I said, my voice steady. I heard you. Just now. You said you did it to save your future. You said she found the statements. I was scared, she sobbed. I didn't know he was going to kill her. I just wanted him to scare her. Ryder laughed. It was a wet, gurgling sound from the ground. Don't lie, sweetheart. You paid $5,000 up front. You said, make sure she doesn't talk. You knew exactly what you were buying. Shut up. Morgan shrieked at him. Shut up. Say it again, I said to Ryder, leaning down. Say it for the microphone. She paid me. Ryder spat, blood on his teeth. She set it up. She gave me the keys. She told me when the old lady would be alone. She wanted the house sold so she could cash out and leave town. She played us both. Is that true, Morgan? I asked, looking at her. She collapsed against the side of her car, sliding down to the pavement. We were drowning, Hunter. Evan is weak. He couldn't provide. I did what I had to do. You killed my mother for money, I said. That's what you had to do. She was old. Morgan screamed, her mask finally slipping, revealing the monster underneath. She had her life. We had nothing. She wouldn't help us. She wouldn't sell. She was selfish. There it was. The confession. I looked at her with pure disgust. She wasn't selfish. She was decent. Something you'll never be. I tapped the screen on my phone. Send. I looked up toward the entrance of the shipyard. You can come in now. Suddenly, the night exploded with light. Floodlights from a dozen vehicles blinded us. Sirens wailed, echoing off the metal containers. A helicopter roared overhead, its spotlight pinning us to the ground. It wasn't just the local police. It was the state police, the FBI. And leading the charge was a woman in a Kevlar vest with prosecutor emblazoned on the back. Ryder tried to scramble up, but 3 red laser dots appeared on his chest. Federal agents. Stay down, a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Morgan screamed as officers swarmed her, pulling her arms behind her back and slapping cuffs on her wrists. Ryder was pinned to the ground, a boot on his neck. I stood in the middle of the chaos, my hands raised slowly. The prosecutor, a woman named D.A. Sterling, walked up to me. I had served with her brother in the unit. She was the one Felix had told me to call. You cut it close, Hunter, she said, shouting over the noise of the helicopter. Did you get the audio? I asked. Clear as day, she nodded. Ryder admitting the hit. Morgan admitting the motive. Plus the wiretap from the house. We have them on conspiracy, money laundering, and first-degree murder. They're never seeing the sun again. I watched as they dragged Morgan toward a squad car. She was kicking and screaming, shouting Evan's name, begging for help. She looked at me one last time before they shoved her into the back seat. Her eyes were full of hate. This isn't over, she screamed. I'll get a lawyer. I'll get out. You can try, I whispered to myself. I looked down at Ryder. He was being hoisted up by 2 agents. He looked defeated. His empire had crumbled in less than 24 hours. "You're good," Ryder muttered as he passed me. "Who are you really?" "Just a son," I said. As the convoy of police cars started to leave, flashing lights painting the shipyard in red and blue, I felt a strange hollowness. I had won. I had caught the killer. I had dismantled the gang. But my mother was still dead. The victory didn't bring her back. It just balanced the scales. I walked over to my rental car. DA Sterling put a hand on my arm. "We need a statement," she said. "And you need to prepare yourself. The trial is going to be ugly. Morgan is going to lie. She's going to blame everyone but herself." "Let her," I said. "I have one more card to play." "What card?" Sterling asked. I touched the pocket where I kept the piece of the family photo. Something my mother left behind. Something Morgan doesn't know about. I got in the car. The fight on the street was over. The fight in the courtroom was just beginning. And I intended to finish it. The courtroom was packed. Every seat was filled with reporters, neighbors from Fifth Street, and curious onlookers. I sat in the second row, watching the back of Morgan's head. She was wearing a navy blue suit, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked small. Beside her sat Victor Thorne, the high-priced lawyer she had hired with dirty money. He looked confident, tapping a pen against his legal pad. On the other side of the aisle sat Ryder, shackled and wearing an orange jumpsuit. He stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. The trial had been going on for 3 days. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named DA Sterling, had laid out the financial trail perfectly. But Victor was good. He was chipping away at every piece of evidence, calling it circumstantial and hearsay. Now, it was my turn to take the stand. "State your name for the record," Sterling said. "Hunter Vance," I replied into the microphone. "Mr. Vance, can you tell the jury what you found when you returned to your mother's home?" I recounted the timeline, the disabled cameras, the missing ring, the fear in the neighborhood. I kept my voice steady, military calm. I looked at the jury when I spoke. They were listening. Then it was Victor's turn for cross-examination. He stood up slowly, buttoning his jacket. He walked toward the witness stand with a shark-like grin. "Mr. Vance," he began, "you are a former Special Forces operator, correct?" "Yes," I said. "You are trained in interrogation, in psychological warfare, in violence." "I am trained to protect," I corrected. "And yet," Victor said, pacing in front of the jury box, "you took it upon yourself to conduct a vigilante investigation. You broke into my client's home. You installed illegal listening devices. You physically assaulted Mr. Ryder. You are a dangerous man, Mr. Vance." "Objection," Sterling called out. "Relevance." "The relevance, Your Honor," Victor said smoothly, "is that this entire case is built on the testimony and actions of a man who sees enemies everywhere. A man who entrapped a grieving daughter-in-law and a businessman into a confrontation he orchestrated." He turned back to me. "You hate my client, don't you?" "I hate what she did," I said. "You wanted revenge," Victor pressed. "So you manufactured a scenario to frame her." "I didn't manufacture anything," I said, my voice hardening. "She paid for the hit. She admitted it. Under duress." Victor shouted, "While you were threatening her with a weapon. That confession is worthless." He was good. I could see the jury shifting in their seats. Doubt was creeping in. If Victor could get the recording thrown out or disregarded, Morgan might walk. Victor smiled, thinking he had won. No further questions. I didn't move from the stand. I looked at DA Sterling. She nodded. "Redirect, Your Honor," Sterling said. She walked to the evidence table and picked up a small flash drive. "Mr. Vance," she said, turning to me, "the defense claims you manufactured this narrative, that your mother was just a random victim of a robbery. Is there any evidence, independent of your investigation, that suggests otherwise?" "Yes," I said. "There is one final piece." Victor frowned. He checked his notes. He hadn't expected this. "Your Honor," Sterling said, addressing the judge, "the state introduces Exhibit 47, a voicemail recovered from the victim's cloud account, time-stamped 45 minutes before her death. Victor jumped up. Objection. Ambush. It was entered into discovery this morning. Counselor, Sterling said coldly. Check your email. The judge nodded. Proceed. Sterling plugged the drive into the court's audio system. The room went silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. My mother's voice filled the room. It was shaky, breathless. Hunter, it's Mom. I know you're away, but I need to tell someone. I'm at the store, but I'm scared to go home. Morgan was here today. She was screaming about the house. She found out I saw the bank statements. The ones with that Obsidian company name. Morgan stiffened in her chair. Ryder looked up at the ceiling. She told me I was ruining everything. My mother's voice continued, trembling. She said if I didn't sign the papers, she would make sure I wasn't a problem anymore. She had a look in her eyes, Hunter. I've never seen her like that. And then, she asked for my spare key. I gave it to her because I was afraid she would hurt me right there. A gasp went through the gallery. If something happens to me, the voicemail ended. It wasn't an accident. I love you, honey. Be safe. The recording clicked off. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. The weight of her words hung in the air like smoke. It wasn't hearsay. It wasn't a soldier's theory. It was the victim, speaking from the grave, pointing a finger directly at her killer. Victor sank into his chair. He knew it was over. There is no defense against the voice of the dead. Suddenly, a chair scraped loudly against the floor. Morgan stood up. She wasn't looking at the jury. She was looking at Evan, who was sitting in the front row, his head in his hands. I had to, she screamed, her voice cracking. I did it for us, Evan. We were going to lose everything. The judge banged his gavel. Order. Sit down. But Morgan didn't sit. She was unraveling. The perfectly crafted mask had shattered. She was going to tell the police. Morgan shouted, tears streaming down her face. She was going to send me to jail for fraud. I couldn't let her. We needed the money, Evan. Why won't you look at me? Bailiff, the judge roared. 2 officers rushed forward and grabbed Morgan by the arms. She struggled, kicking and screaming. Tell them, Evan. Tell them we were drowning. Evan stood up slowly. He looked at his wife, the woman he had shared a bed with, the woman who had murdered his mother for a payout. We weren't drowning, Evan said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly in the silent room. You were, and you pulled us all down with you. He turned his back on her and walked out of the courtroom. Morgan's scream was primal, a sound of pure despair. Evan, no, don't leave me. The officers dragged her out through the side door, her screams fading into the hallway. Ryder just shook his head, looking at the empty door. He knew his fate was sealed. I sat in the witness box, feeling a strange calmness wash over me. The fight was done. The truth was out. The judge looked at the jury. They looked shell-shocked. We will recess for verdict deliberation, the judge said. But everyone knew they wouldn't need long. I stepped down from the stand. D.A. Sterling met me at the gate. You did good, Hunter, she said softly. That recording, that was the nail in the coffin. It wasn't me, I said. It was her. She fought back, even at the end. I walked out of the courtroom into the bright hallway. The reporters were already swarming, flashing cameras, shouting questions. I pushed past them. I didn't have anything to say to them. I had said everything I needed to say to the only person who mattered. I walked outside. The sun was shining. The air smelled of rain and exhaust, just like the day I came home. But the heaviness was gone. I took out my phone and looked at the picture of my mom one last time. Rest easy, Mom, I whispered. Mission accomplished. The gavel didn't just end the trial. It ended an era of my life. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. The verdict was unanimous on all counts. First-degree murder, conspiracy, money laundering. When the foreman read the word guilty, Morgan didn't scream this time. She just slumped forward, her forehead touching the defense table, and wept silently. Ryder stared at the wall, his face a mask of stone. He knew the game was over before it started. The judge sentenced them both to life without the possibility of parole. No deals. No second chances. They were escorted out in chains, disappearing through the heavy oak doors, gone from our lives forever. But walking out of that courthouse didn't feel like a victory parade. It felt like waking up after a long, feverish nightmare. The sun was too bright. The city noise was too loud. I found Evan sitting on a bench outside, staring at the pigeons pecking at crumbs on the sidewalk. He looked like a man who had survived a shipwreck, exhausted, hollowed out, but alive. "It's done," I said, sitting next to him. "I know," he whispered. He didn't look at me. I keep thinking, if I had just paid more attention, if I hadn't been so weak, maybe Mom would still be here. "Guilt is a useless weapon, Evan," I said gently. "You can't use it to change the past. You can only use it to hurt yourself. Morgan made her choices. You didn't pull the trigger." He nodded slowly, wiping his eyes. "What do we do now? The house, do we sell it?" I looked across the street at the city skyline. "No, we don't sell. Ryder wanted that neighborhood to die so he could buy it cheap. If we sell, he wins from inside his cell. We keep it." "Keep it?" Evan looked at me, confused. "But I can't live there alone. And you're going back overseas, right?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out my deployment orders. I had received them in the mail 2 days ago. I was scheduled to return to base next week. I tore the paper in half. "No," I said. "I'm done running away to fight other people's wars. There's enough work to do right here." We spent the next week cleaning the house. We didn't stage it for a sale. We reclaimed it. We scrubbed the floors. We painted the porch. We threw out every single thing that belonged to Morgan. Her clothes, her fancy furniture, the expensive vase she bought with blood money. We burned it all in a bonfire in the backyard, watching the smoke rise into the night sky. It was cleansing. The neighbors started coming by. At first, just one or two. Mrs. Higgins from next door with a casserole, Mr. Alvarez from across the street with a toolbox. They had been terrified of Ryder's gang for months. But now, with Ryder gone and his crew dismantled by the raids, the fear was lifting. They saw us fixing the house, and they started fixing theirs too. The neighborhood wasn't dying. It was waking up. On the final day, I went to the cemetery. It was a quiet morning, the grass wet with dew. I walked to my mother's grave. The dirt had settled. The headstone was simple, Clara Vance. Beloved mother. Fearless heart. I stood there for a long time, the silence wrapping around me like a blanket. I didn't feel the rage anymore. I didn't feel the need to hunt. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my unit coin, the heavy brass medallion I had carried through 3 tours of duty. It was the symbol of my service, my identity as a soldier. I knelt down and pressed the coin into the soft earth right above her name. "Mission complete, Mom," I whispered. "Sector is secure." I stood up and turned around. Evan was waiting for me by the car. He looked better. He was standing straighter. He waved at me. I walked toward him, leaving the ghosts behind me. I wasn't Hunter the soldier anymore. I wasn't the Avenger. I was just a son who had protected his home. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to live in it. Story finished. Author's note and question for you. This brings us to the end of Hunter's journey. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about protecting the legacy of a family. I have a question for you all, something to think about. If you were in Evan's shoes, and you found out your partner had done something this terrible, could you have turned them in? Or would you have tried to protect them? It's a hard question, I know. Let me know your honest answer in the comments. And while you're there, tell me which city or country you are watching from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button gently. It helps us bring more stories to you. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to join our community. We are building something special here. One last thing, we want to write what you want to hear. What kind of story should we do next? Do you want a military thriller about a soldier coming home to a taken-over town? Or maybe a psychological mystery about a husband who isn't who he says he is? Let me know in the comments exactly what type of story you are craving next, and I will write it for you. Until the next epic story, take care of yourselves and watch your six.